Hey again, it's Jason from Fraser Valley Rose Farm. Well, today I wanted to talk about a slightly different topic. I've talked before about whether you have the legal right to propagate a plant that is patented and how long those patent periods should extend. In a slightly different category of question, and I've had this as a follow-up to that video, is what about those pesky TM symbols or R symbols behind the name of a rose, such as my business, or any other plant? If you are allowed to propagate those plants, are you allowed to use the name? And I have to acknowledge right up front in this video a big debt of gratitude to Tony Avent, who opened my eyes to this issue. I read an article on his website, Plant Delights Nursery. I will link that below the video in case you want to have a good long read, which I promise will be very enlightening as to the practices of the horticultural business. The article is titled "The Misuse of Trademarks in Horticulture," which I think gives you some idea of where I'm going in this video here. Just to review here a little bit, you'll remember in the previous video I made on this that plant patents last for 20 years. So they grant a company or the breeder exclusive rights to that variety for 20 years. Is 20 years an appropriate amount of time? I don't know. You could argue for more, you could argue for less, but that's basically what the international governments have agreed upon, and I'm willing to live with that. The problem is that some of these companies aren't, and so they find ways to skirt around it. Now I'm going to speak a little off the cuff here because, like I mentioned before, I'm not a lawyer. I don't have any, you don't want to take your legal advice from me, but from everything I've read, they are misusing the idea of trademark. And if you read the Tony Avent article that I've linked below here, he comes to the same conclusion. So what they've done is, and I'm going to give you some real life examples here for fear of getting in trouble a little bit with other people from my same industry, but I'm going to go ahead anyway, is to say that Double Delight was introduced in the 70s. I believe that Bonica, which is a very popular rose, was introduced in the 80s, and that a third rose called Livin' Easy was introduced in the 90s. Now I use these names as if those are the real names of the rose. I'm going to reveal to you in a second that they're not. But if you remember from those dates, the 70s, 80s, and 90s, for the 20-year period, those are all expired. So I have the legal right now to go to any of those varieties of roses, take cuttings from them, tissue culture them, do whatever I want to propagate them, and that's an indisputable legal right. The problem is, and here's the catch, that if I go and try to sell those roses, and I try to use those names, then that's when those companies come back and say, aha, but I own the right to that name. So here's what they've done, is the real name of the rose is hidden as a little code. It's in brackets, it's underneath the name, it's like in little parentheses down there. And so for something like Bonica, it's the almost unpronounceable Maidomonac. And for Livin' Easy, I think it's Harwelcome or something like that. So they've intentionally given the plant a nonsensical name that it couldn't possibly be marketed under, leaving people like me in a position. If I wanted to sell something that people understand to be Livin' Easy, I can't use that name, but people won't understand the alternate name. So I really would urge you to go back and read the article by Tony Avent on the misuse of trademarks in horticulture. But from what I understand, all of these could be subject to legal challenge, and maybe even should be. But here's the problem for me, is I'm a small grower, and if you're watching my channel and you're considering being a backyard gardener or backyard nursery, you're a small grower too, and the last thing that you want is to get a letter from one of these companies that says you need to cease and desist using our intellectual property, our trade names. And you probably wouldn't want to get into a legal fight over it either. So I just want to go through one technicality here, and it's kind of an ugly workaround, but it's what I do right now. If I go onto my website and I want to post some of the roses that I've propagated, I know I have the legal right to propagate them through the plant patent law, but it has a name that's restricted. Well, then what I do is I tell my users quite forthrightly, these are the names the denominations, the coded denominations of these roses. Here's a website where you can find the information of what those roses really are, and then I don't tell them. Alternately, I guess I could just rename the roses. So this is a little weird because the trade names that they gave the roses are not legitimate names. So Bonica is not Bonica. Bonica is a trade name of Mailand. I could call that Popular Pink Shrub Rose. I could make labels on that name and I could put it out there myself, and that could be the name of the rose as far as it is in my market. I hate the idea of doing that because it's unclean, because it's not fair to rosarians, it's not fair to the customer, it's not fair to the future to have market confusion over what the name of this rose is. So honestly, I would just really encourage the rose companies to stop this ugly practice of giving fake, nonsensical names to their roses and then patenting or trademarking and registering the trade name. I also think, and this is where I'm going to wax a little moral on you, is I think they're abusing the rose societies. I think they're abusing the goodwill of the public in this manner, because the rose societies and the display gardens and exhibition gardens display it under the name Neptune, under the name Hot Cocoa, under the name Julia Child. They put them out there as if that's the real name of the plant and they promote it. But what they're really doing is they're giving advertisement to these companies that are doing this unscrupulous practice of trademarking these names. Then when the trademark period or when the patent period comes to an end and it's time for these roses to belong to the world, then they go, aha, that was never the real name of the rose. We fooled you. And so you're stuck with this ugly, nonsensical denomination that becomes the name of the rose and somebody holding a trademark over the head of everybody else in the world. So that's my rant on the issue. I'm sorry I don't have a better answer for you about whether you can use these trademarks or not. If you were a lawyer or if you were somebody who has a better understanding of the law than I do, or a little bit of money in the bank, and you wanted to challenge these things, I think you'd have a good chance, at least by my reading of it. But it's not going to be me who does that. So thanks for watching today. I hope I've shed a little bit of light on this ugly practice. And please leave comments below the video. I'd love to hear what you have to say about this.